I'm starting to record, so this would be a perfect time to start. 7 o'clock.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to Orange Audubon Society's Bird Chat. It's November 5th, and we're glad everybody's here. Got a great presentation on sparrows tonight, which we are all excited for. So without further ado, we'll jump into this. Tonight we're going to have a little bit of announcements, plant of the week, mystery birds, some new arrivals, and then we'll have our program on sparrows by Adam Kent. So coming up, before we get into that, next week we'll have a presentation on wild turkeys by Jay Exum. And on the 19th, we go back to our regular programming on Orange Audubon's YouTube page for YouTube Live. It'll be the topic's bird banding studies with Jim McGinty, which should also be very cool. And the week after that is Thanksgiving, and we don't have bird chat. So for tonight, I'm going to pass this over to Kathy, and she's going to tell you about a field trip at Lake Apopka.
Okay, and you're the first group to get to hear about this. This is a very limited edition field trip. This will be held at the North Shore of Lake Apopka. We're going to meet at McDonald Canal. We have permission to drive out there. Limited to 10 people. Was out there today, and this is one of the birds we saw, and hopefully we'll see a lot more different variety of sparrows by November 14th. If you want to attend, you need to contact me. I'm taking reservations starting November 7th, which is Saturday. First 10 people, masks are required, and we will practice social distancing. Let me know if you have questions. Back to Sam.
So we also very excited about the North Shore Birding Festival, which is December 3rd through the 7th. You can find all the info at orangeaudubonfl.org/festival. And word on the streets is we're about 40% booked up on a lot of these trips. They're limited to 10 people. Same thing Kathy discussed. We'll be practicing social distancing, wearing masks. But again, a lot of these were driving separate, that kind of thing. But there's a lot of really cool trips, a lot of really cool birders. It should be super fun and very educational at the same time. So, but it is filling up fast. I would check it out tonight or as quick as you can and try to sign up for some of these. But it's super fun, and I'm kind of new to it. I led a trip last year and had a blast, and it's super cool to interact with a lot of these people. So. All right. Deborah Green is going to tell us about the plan of the week.
Okay. I saw this at Magnolia Park by the ramp there, but I know you see it all over now that I'm going to tell about it. You'll notice it more. It's one of the duck potatoes. There's quite a few other species, but this is the common one. It's pretty tall, maybe 3 feet tall, 4 feet tall, and pretty white flower. And do you see those balls? Those are the seeds after the flowers. And it's named bull-tongue arrowhead because of the shape of the leaves. It's a complete wetland plant. It often goes with pickerel weed, the purple one. I'll feature that another day. And why is it called duck potato? I always thought that it was wood duck ate the seed things, but in researching it, I learned that it has actually a kind of potato root that the ducks get. So there you go, duck potato. And this is the specific species is called bull-tongue arrowhead. Okay. And here's the range of it. It's throughout the South. You can just call it duck potato. That'd be fine.
Very cool. All right. And now we're going to our mystery bird. And you can type in the what you think this bird is in the chat box, and Susan will keep an eye on that and call out a winner. And then Kathy will explain it to you.
Yeah, so since we're talking about sparrows, this is one of those little brown birds that you possibly could mistake for a sparrow. So this is not the best picture, but this is kind of how you see them. You just see this little bird, and it's all in the branches or in the tangle. And So I don't see any answers yet. Let's see who wants to take a guess.
All right, Lori's got an answer.
What does Lori say?
Lori says house wren.
Oh boy, that's good. So we'll go ahead and go to the next picture because I was going to play it, but I'm going to go ahead and play it. This is actually from today. We went walking out at McDonald Canal, which is an amazing place on the North Shore. So I'm going to play you first the call, and all of you are going to probably say, oh, I've heard that around my house, you know, like recently, because they've just come in droves. So you're going to hear a lot of this. They're very, very noisy little birds, but sometimes they have this beautiful song. Wait for it, wait for it. So they're not singing a whole lot right now, but occasionally they do. So I'll give you just a little information. The house wren has one of the largest ranges of any songbird in the New World. Now we're not in their breeding range, but in their breeding range, they're kind of a problem because they are tough and they'll compete for nests, and they're the main source of nest failure for bluebirds, tree swallows, prothonotary warblers, and chickadees. So they're kind of tough. They're very, you can go back to the previous one. For ID purposes, oh, I guess you can't go back. There you, oh, you did. They're very subdued brown overall compared to other wrens. Their eyebrow is very, very faint. They have a darker barring on their wings and tail. They're very energetic. They move around a lot. You'll find them in tangles and low branches. They eat insects, spiders, beetles, caterpillars, daddy long legs. And something interesting I saw at All About Birds, they eat snail shells for calcium. Both males and females sing, and their population is pretty stable. And if you want to attract any kind of wren to your home, you want to be sure to have a brush pile. You know, maybe as you're trimming your trees and stuff, leave a little brush pile, and the wrens really, really like that. So, and then the next slide, here's their range, and you can see, see on the next slide, he's entrenched in the, you can go ahead, uh-oh. Anyways, you'll see that they encompass most of North America. We lost Sam. We lost our PowerPoint.
Okay, I'll get it back.
Yeah, we'll get it. Tech issues. See those house sparrows? They're tough.
They are
tough. They attacked our slideshow. Yeah.
1 second.
Yeah. Hang on, everybody. But this is one. I noticed the house wrens for about the past 2.5, 3 weeks, and they're very, very predominant. You'll see them anywhere that you see, you know, shrubs and tangles of vines and things like that. All right. We're going to make it through this. Everyone hang in there. All right, here we go. And okay. And
Next one.
Yeah, next one. So you can see the range map. So they're going to be here all winter. Okay, so we can go on. I think the next is new arrival with Jack.
Hey guys, I just got a message from Sam that his internet stopped working completely. So
I did.
I'll be right. Anyway, so this guy, so I was had my camera lens pointed at a peregrine falcon, and I was pretty close to the peregrine, and then the peregrine looked, and then I looked, and then this guy was flying towards us, and then it was like he saw the peregrine. I assume it's not me, and he banked hard, so that's how I got this shot. But anybody have a guess about what this new arrival is? Yay! Oh,
Yay.
Oh, she gets 2 prizes. Good for her. Yeah, this is a ringneck duck. You can see the distinctive white line on her bill. They also have a distinctive short crest, which gives their head kind of an angular look. The species is native to North America, but they are spreading around. Maybe go next slide. And here's another shot of one who can actually see the ring on the neck. It's usually typically hard to see. This is a male. They dive for their food in shallow water. They're potentially vulnerable to intensive hunting, which I believe the politically correct word is overharvest. And they are also prone to ingest spent lead shot. So hopefully the hunters out there are converting away from lead shot in their ammunition. Population estimates are imprecise because the species is so difficult to census, and much of its current breeding range is not included in areas traditionally surveyed by specialists in waterfowl. But nonetheless, they say the population is increasing. And if we go to the next slide, please. And this is a male on the left, and that's a female on the right.
And so much difference in size.
Yeah, and I checked the coloration. That is not a first-year female. The first-year ones are very, very, very dark looking, and they do have completely different eye color too.
Cool.
And this is their distribution range.
So they're just here with us in the winter. Okay, very cool. All right.
All right. Okay, I have the next new arrival. And this is kind of a little falcon, small stocky falcon, blocky head, heavily streaked body, sharp pointy wings. I almost said rings. What do you guys think this one is? All right, Kim's got this, Merlin. Very good. The Merlins.
Oops, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. The Merlins, I think there's one in between. There we go. Merlins are very quick flying. They make real quick turns. I was reading about the difference between the peregrines go really fast, but they're not as quick at turns as the Merlins and the kestrels. I have an overall, if you're looking up at them to tell the difference they're a little bit bigger than a kestrel. They have a darker wings underneath. They have a very up and down wing beat compared to a kestrel. They kind of push it back like they're swimming. They do eat, unfortunately, songbirds and shorebirds, and of course, dragonflies. They often will hunt in pairs with one kind of herding little birds towards the other. So one of the things they were used also back in the old days, they were used by the falconers in those medieval days when they did their hunting with the falcons. They don't have as strong of that mustache that the other falcons have. And we actually do have 3 types of Merlins in North America. Way up in the Northwest, Pacific Northwest, there's a black one, which is obviously really dark. In the center of the country, in the prairie states, there's a prairie, which is really a light colored one. And then this one, it's called the Taiga, T-A-I-G-A. And this one is the one that's predominant throughout the country. And mostly, that's the only kind that we have on the east. They are, the female is a little bit bigger, just like the other a lot of the other birds, the female will be a little bit bigger, which can sometimes make them a little bit confusing with some of the other birds. I'm hearing something. Is that a question or?
I think that was.
Or just a mistake. Let's go ahead to the map. We'll take a peek. You can see their tail. They have that nice banded tail with a white edge, which kind of helps with a lot of the way to distinguish the different birds. So we see them in our winters for the non-breeding. They have a pretty big range for non-breeding. If you look across here, they do migrate through the north. We have seen, I think we saw a really early one over at the Wakaiba on one of the surveys. But so we do have them here now, and I think they've been spotted at Loud.
Kathy, Taiga means the boreal forest. That whole orange band is forest. So that's where that name comes from.
Nice. All right. And that's the Merlin.
Okay, what's next?
And next,
Oops, sorry.
next we have the Sparrow presentation.
Okay, so we'll share over to you. New share. And I'm going to stop sharing. You share now, Adam. Hi, everybody, by the way. Frelick and Bob and Loretta, Gigi.
Did that work?
Yes.
All right. Good. Let's see here.
That, what he's showing now is the sheet we got from Bayou City Birding. Is that, you looked it up, Adam?
Yeah, okay, right. Well, thanks for inviting me, Deborah. Yeah, I was looking, I lost the screen where I can see everybody's faces and all that. Maybe that's because of the screen sharing, but yeah, so I want to thank Deborah for inviting me. Thank you very much. And I was digging this, this whole bird chat thing so much, I forgot I was about to give a presentation, but yeah, that, so this thing, I guess, can you see my cursor there also?
Uh-huh.
So it's from whiteoakbayou.org. So I just went to that website and they have all kinds of cool resources on there. And this thing has a front and back. And then they've got various other Sparrow cheat sheets, bird jargon specifically related to sparrows. But I thought this was awesome. I have not seen this before, and I think it's great. It doesn't have Henslow sparrow or Bachman sparrow, which I will talk about today. It's from Houston, White Oak Bayou, and those two species aren't quite as common there, but it's a great resource. And they even have a thing where you can sparrow flashcards. You can print it up two-sided, and then you can, on the back will be the information about the bird on the front, so you can quiz yourself. And so I think that's awesome. Yeah, that's the first time I've ever had anyone, before I'm doing a talk, send me a great resource I'd never seen before. So that's great. But let's see, this is my first slide. And that resource you sent, Deborah, was perfect because the key to sparrowing is to be prepared. And it's not, well, I'll talk about this other thing later. Sparrows really aren't all that tricky, like shorebirds that are always on the opposite side of a big mud flat with a heat shimmer, or ducks that are on the other side of the lake, or some Impidinax flycatchers or something. Sparrows really are not all that difficult to distinguish, but the trick is just to get a good look at them, at least in Florida, because we're
aquí mirando el meeting del pájaro.
Okay, I'll mute just a second.
Oh, okay.
Okay, muy bien. Hablamos después.
Okay, está bien.
Okay, bye.
I'll see.
Yeah. So you're seeing the getting started with sparrow identification right now thing on my screen?
Yep.
Okay, good. So I was saying they're not nearly that challenging. You just have to be prepared, because in the winter in Florida, they're not on their breeding grounds except for one species that I'll go into more detail about. But they pop up for just a second, then they run around down the grass where you can't see them very well. So that's what I'll talk about today. And it's called getting started sparrow identification, as opposed to just plain sparrow identification, because it'd be sort of like if I had a talk called how to play piano in half an hour, or how to learn how to play basketball in half an hour. This is just sort of tips to get you started. So anyway, I'll move on to the next one. Let's see. Wait, it worked. Can you see the next slide now? Oh, good. There's not too much of a delay. So these three clues for bird identification apply to all species of birds, not just sparrows, but I'll be specifically addressing these in relation to sparrows. Distribution is not just like as far as the range, are they in Florida or not, but it's habitat and also even microhabitat. Behavior is very important, and I think that's often sort of pushed to the back and overlooked a little bit. So I'm emphasizing that even above appearance. Appearance is almost the least important thing because, first of all, distribution, there's almost 11,000 species of birds in the world. You got to narrow it down to the few hundred kinds that might be in your area. And then it's also distribution in place and in time. So what birds are there at this specific time? And then you start looking at other clues, but I'll go into some detail on that. Let's see. Okay, so here's an example of how these three general clues to bird identification would work. It's mid-December, so this is your time and place. You're in a grassy field in north central Florida. You flush a small dark sparrow, and that's the appearance, and it's got a short tail. It flies low for a real short distance with a weak flight and drops back into the grass. You walk back over towards where it dropped down, you don't see it again. Well, that's a good chance it could be this guy, a Henslow sparrow. You know, it could have been a Savannah sparrow, but they'll usually fly stronger and farther, and they'll pop back up again if you walk over to where they were. It could be a LeConte sparrow, but they're usually a little bit wetter, not quite as dark. You know, other sparrows like song or swamp have longer tails. Vesper tend to fly up higher, they're bigger. So that's the kind of stuff I'm going to be talking about today. But the trick is, like I just illustrated, hopefully with this Henslow sparrows, you're prepared for with all these different probabilities of what you're looking at based on the behavior, the location, the habitat, and a few details that you might not see very well. So I'll go into just a little bit more detail here before I'm going to talk about some pitfalls for sparrow identification, and then I'll go over get into the sparrows themselves. So let's see here. All right, so this is talking about range again. Here's a chipping sparrow, and this is a typical range map, and you guys all know about these. You know, this is a typical of a lot of sparrows, only in Florida in the winter. And you know, this purple is year-round, red is breeding range. So if you're farther north, if you ever happen to be traveling up north when it's safe to travel again, maybe you want to take a long drive or something, you can see these sparrows on their breeding grounds, and that's a great way to actually get a look at them when they're perched up singing. They're not just skulking around in the bushes. So we've got the range, and then this is the distribution in terms of time. And Deborah, I sent Deborah a eBird bar chart that I think she sent around to everybody or posted somehow. This is just a little clip from it. You may or may not be able to read this very well. This just shows a few of the sparrows in your area. This is from Orange and Lake County. And you can see this is May through September. Not very many sparrows except for Bachman sparrow is here year round. So if you're in May, June, July, August, and you see a sparrow, probably a Bachman sparrow. These bar charts are great for preparing for a trip or just learning birds in general. And the other thing you can do in eBird, which I just love, is if you go in, and I think you might need to use Firefox, and it doesn't work in Chrome, but you can make one of these bar charts, and you can download the bar chart, and then you get the spreadsheet of all the data, and you can sort it and organize it. So this is the rank is just most frequently encountered sparrows. This index is just a sort of a frequency of reporting index. It's not a number that's, it really depends on who's birding where and things like that. But it does give you an idea of which sparrows are more common. Eastern towhee is actually a sparrow. These are the 16 most common sparrows in your area, these two counties, year round. So Eastern towhee, of course, I'm not going to go into detail on those because they're easier to identify. Then Savannah sparrows all over the place. Swamp sparrows, pretty common. Those were the two that people mentioned seeing who were talking about sparrows before we started this thing. House sparrow, it's in bold and italics because it's not really a sparrow in the same sense as the other birds on this list. It's in a different family. It's the Old World sparrows. And but I am going to talk about those because they can be confusion risk. And then you can do a kind of color coding if you want when you put this stuff in a spreadsheet, so you can see these guys, you know, they get less and less common. And then when you get down to field sparrow, they're actually, these sparrows are ones you have to get pretty lucky to see. Someone mentioned a Lincoln sparrow and a clay-colored sparrow that we're seeing, maybe both at Apopka today or recently. And those are pretty uncommon ones. And then even less common, white-throated Henslows and Lacans. But I will talk about those also. So just some fun ways to play around with eBird data. So the first key to sparrowing, though, is you have to go out and look for them. And it's not, I mean, if you're going to look for ducks, you want to go look in a lake. You're going to look for migrant songbirds, you're probably looking in a forest. So same thing goes for sparrows. You go out to a brushy, weedy field to find them. Here's our little sparrow expert, Key Scales. He's the key to knowing your sparrow. So he knows where to go, and he hears a grasshopper sparrow, and he's going to go check it out. So not a grasshopper sparrow, but this is typical habitat for a sparrow. Brushy tangle. You're walking along in that brush area we just saw. Here's a little thicker tangle that provides some good cover. You hear a little chip note coming from the cover, and you go, that sounds kind of unusual. It's a call note coming from thick cover. Let's go investigate. Maybe you sit there quietly and watch, and when these guys pops up, or maybe you just make a little bit of an annoying noise, and this guy pops up. This is a young white crown sparrow that not very common, but they are throughout your area. They're actually not that uncommon around the Zellwood area if you just pish around enough brush piles. But they're also not that visible. They're on the ground in cover. So if you just walk around and you're not thinking, I'm looking for sparrows, you could easily miss these things. And that's part of the main reason why, especially in the Southeast, I think people think sparrows are tricky, is just because you don't really spend that much time looking at them. You wouldn't find, and then this goes into knowing the microhabitat here. You're seeing this white crowned sparrow in a tangle in an open field. Say, for example, you're out in the middle of a field with no brush, and you saw a sparrow flush up, that kind of long tail, maybe similar shape, flies up pretty far away up into a tree somewhere. That would be something more like a vesper sparrow, because these guys like to be around brushy tangle. So you're prepared with your distribution of these and time and place and microhabitat. You've got some of the behaviors down, and then the last thing to think about is memorizing the field marks, and that's what those flashcards that Deborah sent around, or that website, are good for, where you can make the flashcards. So, alrighty. So here's our sparrow expert again. He's got field marks memorized: short tail, streaking on the sides, purplish markings on the nape, silver auricular patch. Got to be a LeConte sparrow, right down there in the grass next to him, maybe. So some of these words, like auricular patch, maybe sound, you may or may not know those. And so that's what we're going to talk about here briefly. This is just a schematic of a sparrow head and some of the common terminology used to describe different parts that are important to know when you're looking at sparrow. So whether or not it has an eye ring, whether it has a median crown stripe, that's just medians like the middle of the road, right down the middle of the head, or lateral crown stripes. Supercilium is a fancy word for eyebrow. You've got the eye line. If it's just behind the eye, it's only a postocular. And then probably the single most important feature on the sparrow is the lores, or the laural stripe. That's this little area, just a few feathers between the eye and the bill. And whether or not the lores are pale or dark can give the bird a whole different expression. And some people say if it has dark lores, a bird might look intelligent or concerned or mean, which I think is a little bit of a mean thing to say. Or if the bird has pale lores, it might look surprised or cute or innocent or stupid. Stupid also, I think, is a little bit of a mean way to put it, but maybe that might help you remember it better. But it changes the whole personality of a bird, just that little group of feathers right here between the eye and the bill. Some birds at the front of their eyebrow here have this area, it's above the lore, so it's a superloral, and that can be yellow in some birds like white-throated sparrow. Auriculars, fancy word for cheek patch. Nape in the back of the neck. And these terms right here, lateral throat stripe, submustachial stripe or malar, and then mustache stripe, those can vary depending on what field guide you're looking at. Any good field guide should have a section at the front called bird topography. And you want to look at that and memorize it. And these will vary a little bit depending on the field guide, but this is a standard terminology that Sibley uses, and Ken Kaufman also uses these words, and it works for me too. But if this seems a little bit daunting, like a lot of jargon or something like that, I suggest trying to draw this yourself. And you may say, I'm not an artist, but really it's a circle and a triangle and some lines. You don't have to be a good artist to draw this. And then you can label these parts after, you look in your field guide and label them. And that will really help focus your eye when you're looking at a bird in real life, like this LeConte sparrow. So what color is the median crown stripe in this LeConte sparrow? We're doing I'm not gonna be able to see it if, oh yeah, Deborah, you're gonna read if somebody enters in the chat, the median crown stripe. This is our audience participation part.
Okay.
Did anyone type in the chat the color of the median crown stripe?
Susan, you do it, right? Right there.
Wait a minute, chat one. Oh, hey, I can see it.
Sorry, Maura.
White. Okay, Maura McAllister, she got it. Yes, it's white. This is it, right? It's pretty thin line, but it's fairly distinctive. What about the auriculars? All right, maybe it'll pop up on my screen this time again. What color are the auriculars on this LeConte sparrow? All right, more chat.
All right, we got a couple answers.
Hooray. Yep. All right, a couple people got that. Good. All right, so you guys are getting the idea. How about the lores? Last one. All right, they're here. A whitish or pale gray. And that gives it a little bit of a cuter look. I'll just kind of imagine for a second that had a dark line right here. It'd look a little bit kind of maybe mean or concerned. Oh, yes, if you're colorblind, that is a good thing to think of. That's a great point. I'm glad someone mentioned that. So you can't see then maybe that this is orange, but you could see that it's paler than the lateral crown stripe, paler than the postocular stripe. So it's just paler. The auriculars also kind of a pale color, contrasting with this, but hard to tell, but there's some contrast. The same here. The lores are paler than the supraloral or the front of the eyebrow. So in general, for bird identification, just basically forget about color. So that's the good news. If you're colorblind, that shouldn't hurt your birding at all. I know some really good birders who are colorblind. It's much more about behavior and structure, the size and shape of the bird. Size, by the way, I didn't mention this earlier, size is one of the best clues and one of the worst clues. It can be super misleading. A lot of things, I get fooled all the time, even when I'm expecting to be fooled. Backlit birds look bigger. There's just a lot of tricks that size can play on. I've seen people think a robin was a goshawk, and that you can be way off with size. But behavior, structure. When you're talking about size, you want to compare a size to the rest of the bird, like its tail. We're going to talk about that in a second anyway. And then it's patterns. It's not so much the colors, but it's the patterns. And another quick story about colors for the colorblind of you out there. Someone once asked me, hey, what's this blue bird here? And I looked at it and I said, that looks blue? And she said, I guess it's brown. And I said, really? So you'd say that's brown then? She said, I'm not sure. And I said, well, how about gray? And she said, well, okay, I guess so. It was a mockingbird. But you could describe a mockingbird as blue, brown, or gray, I guess, depending on how you perceive color. So just don't worry about color so much. All right, so we talked about the different parts of this. You guys can go home and draw a circle and a triangle on it and then practice drawing all the different sparrows. It's a great way to memorize them. And like I said, the key is being prepared. Here's another way to practice. All right, it's not a sparrow, we know that. It's Carolina wren, we don't even need to guess with this one. So it's on a suet feeder in our yard, and you probably won't have too many sparrows except for one kind come into your yard, and I'll talk about those in a little bit, but you probably do have Carolina wrens or cardinals or downy woodpeckers in your yard. So the key then, if you want to practice looking at these details, instead of waiting to try on the sparrow that pops up for a second and then is gone, practice on these birds in your yard. What color is the crown of a Carolina wren? It's brown. How about the auriculars of a Carolina wren? Have you ever thought about that before? They're grayish. The postocular, it's kind of a rufusy color. The lores, kind of a dark gray, white eyebrow. You know, there's all, the throat is white compared to the darker, if you're colorblind, slightly darker, but still fairly pale belly. So those are the kinds of things you want to look at as far as patterns. In terms of size, it's a small bird compared to your suet feeder, so much smaller than the suet feeder. And then other dimensions, the tail is about the size of the body. That's the kind of stuff you're looking for. You want to compare size with something of known size or something on the bird. So I highly suggest you practice looking at details on birds in your yard. A fun one to do it on is the downy woodpecker or cardinal. All downy woodpeckers, supposedly, and from my experience, it's true, can be identified just to individual, not to species, but to individual based on their head pattern. I suspect that's true with cardinals too, from my experience. And I think birds can identify themselves based on their own pattern, but we're not quite that good yet, maybe for all birds. Maybe like crows could be tough. But anyway, so practice looking at these details in your yard. And one last thing before I get into the identification photos, this slide is not intended to turn you off from birding for your whole life here. This is just to show the importance of scientific names. Now, if this were a live audience, I'd say how many, raise your hand if you ever look at bird scientific names, but we don't need to do that here. The scientific name is the second column here. The first is, each scientific name has two parts, a genus and the species. The genus is the first word, and the genus shows relationships with other birds. So I've, the ones that aren't highlighted, that are just blank, are all a monotypic genus so far as it goes in Florida. They don't have any other members of the same genus. And then the ones that are colored are in the same genus. So chipping clay-colored field sparrow are all Spizella, white-crowned, white-throated are Zonotrichia, and these last three are all Melaspisa. I'm going to talk about that more later. But I also circled or polygoned out the a few birds in red here, grasshopper sparrow, and then these three here. These LeConte's and Henslows and grasshopper all used to be amodromous, but now it's only grasshopper sparrow, amodromous or ammodramus. You can pronounce it either way. They split these guys out and moved their position taxonomically. Savannah sparrow a long time ago was in that same genus, but it's been in Passerculus for a long time. But they're all small sparrows that you find in the grass with short tails. So I'm gonna lump those together when I talk about them. So the point of this slide is just to show you that I'll be lumping these sparrows, and then I'll talk about it more when I show you the slide of each of those. But for sparrows or anything else, you've probably heard of Empidnax flycatchers or accipiter hawks. Just looking at the genus is important. You don't have to know how to pronounce it because nobody knows how to pronounce scientific names. Everyone just makes it up no matter how much they pretend to know how. If there's no other birds in the same genus nearby, then you don't have anything to compare it with. But if you see chipping sparrow and you notice it's a Spizella, and you also see clay-colored and field are in the same genus, then that's a great hint that structurally, at least, and probably some patterns too, the birds are going to be pretty similar. So this is great for any kind of bird. It works for mammals and other things also. So I just encourage you to at least look at the genus, don't even try to pronounce it, and see if there's anything else in the same genus, and then see what do those birds have the same, what do they have in common as far as shape. Okay, so first I'm gonna talk about a few pitfalls in Sparrow ID, and then I'm gonna go through the Sparrow identification picture. So, all right, what sparrow has a big black spot in its chest? Well, all of them, if the light or if the wind is pushing their feathers up. This is a white-crowned sparrow, and they do not have a black spot in their chest ever, but they do have dark bases to their feathers. And any sparrow and just about any bird, when the feathers are pushed the right way, can show a black spot on their chest. So that can be really misleading. Don't get thrown off by seeing a black spot. And if you do, look, are the feathers maybe a little bit ruffled? That's not a great field mark. A lot of people talk about that, but I don't really like that as a field mark. This is a song sparrow. Do they have a black spot on their chest? Maybe, maybe not. It can be really hard to see that. You can't always see that. How about this one? This is a swamp sparrow. Is that a black spot or not? I can't tell. Is it faded out? Is it the lighting? Did someone mess with the photograph to do something with the contrast on it, which is what a lot of people do after they take pictures of birds, and they go in and jack up all the different settings so you don't know what the bird really looked like. And then does it have stripes on the side? Well, kind of does, but all young, or I should say juvenile sparrows have stripes. So if you see a juvenile sparrow, which should mostly just be Bachmans in Florida, but you could see one that's got a few little feathers left over there, you might see those. Swamp sparrows, also another kind of a pitfall in this photo. They've got a really rufusy tail, but the lighting in this photo is kind of weird. So it just looks almost blackish, or maybe one side's blackish and one's maybe rufusy or some weird light. So color can be really hard to tell. Also, should have rufus in the wings, but that can be hard to see. A lot of people look at swamp sparrows and think they're white-throated sparrows because depending on the light, that really stands out. But the key for overcoming some of these pitfalls is to watch the bird for a while, see what it looks like in different light, and study all the different birds you see, because swamp sparrow is one of the most common sparrows here, wintering sparrows after maybe savanna. And then what happens is, just like with so much birding, somebody says swamp sparrow and you've seen that already that day and just look for some other rare sparrow. Instead of going, okay, let's take a close look at this one. Swamp sparrows are great ones to watch because they vary so much. A lot of these sparrows vary a lot, but swamp sparrows really vary with the amount of like just hints of streaking on them, the way the light can play tricks on you, the heaviness of the markings on the face and things like that. So try to look at every bird you see, really. And you know, going back to looking at birds in your yard, if you're kind of just spending more time at home in your yard watching the cardinals or things like that, because you don't feel like traveling as much or something like that, try to look at every individual cardinal, see if you can identify individual birds. It's kind of a fun thing to do. It makes birding, it gives a whole new dimension to birding. One last, here's a kind of a pitfall, one last sparrow. This is a tan striped morph of the white-throated sparrow. And this is a younger one. It looks like it's got pretty distinct streaking below. So this is a reminder to, David Sibley has a great book called Birding Basics. And even though it's called Basics and it's a tiny book, it's packed full of tons of information. If you have not seen that book, I strongly suggest you get it, look through it, read it over and over, because you can read it 5 times and still come up with new things. And one of his bits of advice in there that I love is make sure the field marks you're looking at are actual field marks to distinguish that bird from someone else. Like you might say, oh, it had streaks below. That's a good field mark for song sparrow or something. Well, that's not a good, that's not really, a lot of sparrows have streaks below, so that's not a distinguishing field mark. Or it had a yellow supraloral, so in focus on that, that's what some people will key into one field mark, but that's not going to tell you what sparrow it is. You need to look at a combination of field works, and then you need to make sure you're actually really seeing those field marks. Is it just the lighting? Is it something else? So you have to make sure the field marks are good and that you really are seeing those field marks. So the last one here, this is a juvenile Bachman sparrow. They only hold this plumage for a few weeks. Juvenile songbirds mold out of their juvenile plumage pretty quickly. You can see it's got the baby lips there, the fleshy gape, a little bit of giveaway. But if you see a sparrow in the summer in Florida, it's either going to be a young Bachman's or a young towhee. And young towhees do have streaks below also, but their wing and tail feathers look like adults, so they look a little bit different. But I do suggest going out and looking at Bachman sparrows late summer, seeing if you can see some young ones pop up too. So anyway, moving on to the sparrow identification pointers here. So I'm gonna put up a sparrow, and so normally I'll ask the audience to guess what it is, but I think just for the sake of time, instead of having people chat in, just say it out loud yourself, whatever is the first thing that comes to mind, because this is another good thing about a way to learn birds is you learn better if you make mistakes. If you just look at it and you don't try, the learning process in your brain doesn't work as well as if you try and you make a mistake, because then it makes you, you think about why you got it wrong, and it also sort of embeds it in your brain better. So just say this to yourself, and then magically the name appears on the screen. And if you said white-throated sparrow, you're right. So this is the first of our 2 Zonotrichia sparrows, and this is the genus now that we see in Florida. They're really big sparrows, big and chunky, and Zonotrichia mean lined thrush. They're called that because of these stripes on their head. And they have long tails, so big, chunky, long tail, only here in the winter. They like tangles. White-throated is often in tangles in the woods, whereas white-crowned is often a little bit more in tangles in open areas. And you know, they can fly and move around, and migration birds can be found anywhere, but those are some general rules. Unstreaked below, except for if you're looking at this, they come in 2 morphs, a white stripe morph, which is black and white stripes in the head, and a tan stripe morph, which is tan, off-white, and tan striped stripes in the head. The tan stripe morph has lateral throat stripes that you can't see so much in the white stripe morph. And it sometimes has these kind of faint streakings on the chest, but that can be, you know, you see more or less of that. A lot of people might think this is a female or a young one, but there are equal numbers of these 2. There's a long, interesting story about how they always mate with the opposite sex there. Sorry, they mate with the opposite sex, and they also mate with the opposite color morph. So tans mate with the whites, whites mate with the tans. So that's the white-throated sparrow. Moving on. All right, what do you think this one is?
Oh, a white-crowned sparrow.
White-crowned sparrow. Yep, there you go. That proves it. So their throat really is, depending on the lighting, it could look really white, but it's not outlined in dark, although there's kind of a little crease here, so it could look like it's outlined in dark. But they have more gray on their nape. They don't have a yellow superlaurel, which I forgot to mention here. The front of the eyebrow of the white-throated sparrow is always yellow. And on the white-crowned sparrow, you never have the yellow. They're a little bit more slender than a white-throated sparrow, but they're also a big Zonotrichia sparrow. They're both uncommon in the winter, but these in Zellwood, you poke around enough, you'll pop one of these up. Whereas white-throated sparrows, just really rarely, if you remember that little chart I showed earlier, pretty rare that far south. You got to kind of come up to Gainesville and go to some of the trails off of Paynes Prairie to see them, or North Florida, look at some vine tangles and the edge of woods edges to find white-throated. White-crowned, however, go a little bit farther south. All right, so remember how there were 2 different color morphs of white-throated sparrow? On white-crowned, it's a little bit different. On white-crowned sparrows, they are the younger birds, not juveniles, because that's only a few weeks. This is the formative plumage. It's an immature, you could say, white-crowned sparrow. You can confuse these a little bit with a chipping sparrow, or a lot sometimes. They do have a dark line through their eye, but they're a lot bigger. They're also kind of slender and long-tailed like a chipping sparrow, but they're bigger. They a little bit sometimes crested look when they raise their crown feathers, median crown stripe that can be hard to see. In general, a little bit of a different kind of an overall impression, size and shape than chipping sparrow. The dark line through the eye is not as defined either. So, and usually if you see a young one, you probably see an adult around there too. Not always, but often. Okay, but this is not a different sex or color morph. This is just a younger bird, younger white-crowned sparrow. All right, so here is our, someone want to guess this one? Well, say it out loud yourself while I cue up the sound. Here's our only breeding sparrow with the word sparrow in its name. That's a real sparrow, not a house sparrow. It's a Bachman sparrow, or supposedly it's supposed to be called Bachman's, like your back, but most people say Bachman's. Also called the pinewood sparrow for a very good reason. And you have those around there. I also have to point out here, I forgot earlier, these are, you can see down here in the bottom right, Reinhard Giesler. He took most of these sparrow shots, and you guys know him, local birder for you guys. Super nice guy, awesome photographer. And yeah, thanks to him for letting me use his picture. So Bachman Sparrow, Piney Wood Sparrow, Tosahatchee Wildlife Management Area, not too far from you guys, has them breeding. They have a really beautiful song. It's kind of strange for a bird to say this. I'm going to play it. Hopefully this will work in the speakers. So if that worked, give me a thumbs up. Did that work? Good. Okay. So a good mnemonic for that song is that they're saying, here, kitty, 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 which is a really weird thing for a bird to want to say, especially one that spends a lot of time on the ground. But it's a good way to remember it. Anyway, beautiful songster. They start singing pretty early. You can go out there by March, if not February, or even late January, in well-burned pine woods and hear them singing. It's a similar shape to a Zonotrichia. It's in its own genus for Florida out west, similar to Cassins and Bottery sparrows. But it's a large sparrow with a long tail, kind of a larger bill than the last two sparrows we talked about. And it's very rufusy. But if you are in the woods in Florida in the summer, it's only going to be this or a towhee, only Bachmans or a towhee. Yeah, unstreaked below, big sparrow, singing a lot in well-burnt pine woods in the early spring. And this is from the first breeding bird atlas of Florida. The red is where they're confirmed. You can see eastern Orange County here, lots of confirmed records singing. They're declining because of lack of burning in some pine woods, but they're still not too hard to find if you go to the right places in the spring looking for them. Next one, our common feeder sparrow. Go ahead and say it out loud to yourself. That's right, chipping. All right. And you can see how it's got that line through the eye like the young white-crowned that we saw earlier. This is kind of the brighter plumage. They can be pretty dull in midwinter, but by spring, they're getting this chestnut cap and a little bit more clean markings on the face. These are the common as I mentioned before, common feeder sparrows, so they're great ones to practice with. They're also the first member of the genus Spizella, and these are sort of like miniature Zonotrichias as far as shape. They're slender and they have long tails. Long being from here to here is about the size of the rest of their body, so pretty long tails, slender, little rounded heads, but they're a lot smaller and daintier than the Zonotrichia sparrows. Things to look for is especially the dark lores to set them apart from the other two Spizella sparrows. All right, here's some chipping sparrows at a feeder in the winter, and you can see how their markings change. The crown's not so clean, and they've got these lateral throat stripes, which are sometimes, this is about as much as I've ever seen on one. And sometimes they almost don't have them at all, but usually they've got a little bit and some other darker facial markings in the winter. So, you know, you might see this and fixate on this lateral throat stripe, then look in a book. You won't see this in any field guides because they just, it's not that usual, but they're super variable. So these are good ones to study, and they do come to millet, and they'll use regular feeders or come to the ground. All right, our next member of the genus Spizella. Anybody want to guess that one? Yes, that's good. Clay colored. All right, so same shape, Spizella shape, dainty little sparrow, little rounded head. You can't see the whole tail here, but it's about the same size as its body. The key thing on this is the pale lores. It gives it a much more kind of innocent look than the chipping sparrow. Also, the pale supercilium and pale malar area, and also the gray, you know, it's kind of buffy on the supercilium and malar and grayish on the nape, offset this auricular area. So that really, these auriculars stand out. And often that's the first thing you'll see when you see a clinical sparrow. So they're kind of in a vagrant way. They're really not that common in Florida. And especially in the fall, during fall migration, they'll show up coming through north central Florida. Then they maybe stack up a little bit more in South Florida in the winter. But so you're out, say, October, late October, in a little, you know, walking down a trail in a a grassy area and you think, oh, it's a little bit early for sparrows, and this thing pops up and it's just a skinny little sparrow on the side of the trail, and you don't really notice many features on it, and then you notice, oh, the ear patch stands out on its face. It's got this blank-faced look. So you want to grab your camera really quick and take a picture so you can document it, because these are usually pop up on your eBird. You get a little rare alert and you have to add the description of it in there. So they are around though, and someone just saw one recently in your area. So hopefully you guys will be able to rush out there tomorrow and get a chance to study clay-colored sparrow soon. They often stick around for a couple days at least, but not too long. All right, another Spizella. This one is, guess it yourself first. What is it? There you go, it's a sparrow. So they've got this long tail. You can see the notch usually in the Spizella tails, not always. It's kind of foreshortened because it's facing away, but it's about the size of a body. They're not normally this chunky, that bird's just a little puffed up. It's not like they're fatter than the chipping or clay colored. They don't have huge claws or talons. That's just the spine on the branch that's sitting on. But they have their facial markings are not that distinctive compared with the clay colored or chipping, but they are pretty variable. One of the things that will often stand out is the white eye ring, although that kind of depends on the lighting. On this one, it's not that distinctive. And the amount of rufous in gray vary. The little pink bubblegum bill does usually stand out. And all these Spizella sparrows are unstreaked below as adults. So here's another look at a field sparrow. This one's a lot more buffy, kind of brownish or pinkish rufusy color. The eye ring stands out more. Eye rings do stand out more in direct light. Even birds without eye rings can look like they have eye rings in certain lighting. But you can see the shape a little bit better on this one. The long tail, can't see a little notch in the tail on this one. But skinny little bird, little bill, unstreaked below. No dark lores at all, not even very distinctive facial markings. It's field sparrow. They breed in North Florida, but they're not that common to the south. So you might have to come up to North Florida and look around some of our sparrow fields if you can't find any down there. All right, how about this one? All right, shout it out loud. You can tell me this one, Susan. Is anyone guessing this one? I want to see.
I don't see any guesses so far.
No, that's because this is a trick. It's not really a sparrow. Well, okay, it's an old world sparrow. Let's make it easier. Here you go. There's the male and here's the female. For all the sparrows in Florida, at least, the males and females look the same. But these guys, house sparrow, the males and females look different. Here's one in its natural habitat on a shopping cart. And when I say natural habitat, I'm not being facetious here. They really, for all of the birds in the world, these probably have evolved with humans for longer than any other bird, or one of the most longest associations with humans. But so that's why people overlook them. Oh, house sparrow. And, you know, also it's a little bit weird to be walking around a parking lot with your binoculars. But what happens when you see them in a natural setting like this? Then what the heck are these things? I've heard of people confusing them for just about anything. So it is worth making a trip down to that, you know, fast food place parking lot. Good excuse to get some French fries or something. Just hang out and watch the sparrows. If you're going shopping and they're nesting your supermarket sign, just bring the binoculars one day and spend some time looking at them. They are similar size and in general similar shape to all these other sparrows. Their bills are a little bit different, a little more conical, but it's hard to tell unless you get a really great look. They kind of have a little bit of a tooth looking thing here. Their heads are a little bit bigger, but that's not a great thing either. Mostly you just need to kind of get some experience looking at them and get familiar with them to tell them apart from other sparrows. There's not like a one clincher to tell these apart. Obviously the male has a different pattern, and seeing different males and females together are a good sign. They're medium-sized, chunky. One of the best ways to tell house sparrows from all the other sparrows is that they're almost constantly calling, just chirping around. And other sparrows might do it with chip note, but it's a different kind of a call, and they don't do it as incessantly as house sparrows. So that's one of the giveaways for house sparrows. But definitely I recommend going somewhere, practicing looking at house sparrows. Here's the next one. We've moved on to a different genus now. Anybody want to guess that? Just say it out loud yourself. All right, someone must have got it by now. Grasshopper sparrow. This is our only Amodromus or Amidromus sparrows, although I'm grouping it with a bunch of some other ones that used to be in that same genus. They're small sparrows that like the grass. In fact, that name I think means sand runner. They're all terrestrial little sparrows, short tails, chunky, big-headed, fairly big bill. Grasshopper sparrows are unstreaked below. Sometimes, depending on their, the individual, they might look like they have a little bit of some streaking here, but doesn't really count as streaking. They may or may not have some orangey yellow in the front of their eyebrows. Sometimes they have none. Most of them have a little bit there. But of all of the other little short-tailed sparrows in the grass have some streaks below. So that's the key for grasshopper sparrow. They are fairly common actually throughout the peninsula, but they're secretive. If you're walking around in any big field with grass, the bigger the field, the better, and you flush a little sparrow, instead of popping up high, it just flies low and not very far. Most likely the grasshopper sparrow. Savannah sparrows fly a little bit higher and a little bit farther. And especially if you go over and look where it landed and it doesn't pop up again, good chance it's a grasshopper sparrow because Savannahs will usually flush. How are we doing on time? I notice it's 8 o'clock. Should I go faster or slower? Or?
It's doing okay. People can leave
Okay.
if they need to, but we're enjoying it.
Okay, all right, thanks. So yeah, grasshopper sparrows are actually are fairly common throughout the peninsula, but they're just hard to get a look at, and they're really secretive. But they're the most common of those secretive sparrows. This is the least common one of the secretive sparrows I'm going to mention. Is that a clue? It's also found in wetter grass areas with this kind of grass, often in margins of shores or dried wetland areas. There you go. That's Lacan's sparrow. Small, short-tailed, streak below. Sometimes they've got streaks across their chest. Sometimes it's just on the side, but it's definitely distinct streaking. We talked about the head pattern on these earlier. Beautiful little sparrow, pretty rare, really, and sometimes eruptive. Some years will be very few to none in North Florida or Central Florida. Other years you'll see more of them. Look for this kind of oranginess on the face, a little bit of eye ring, and that silver auricular, faint streaks just on the side, a little bit daintier bill than the next species we'll look at. Here's another look at one from the back. You can kind of see as gray and purplish on the nape. I'm not going to talk about Nelson sparrow here because those are more coastal, but they do occur rarely inland. There were a few records in your area inland. They've got this on the nape, but their facial pattern is a little different, not quite as much buffy here. They got a little more buffy on their chest. They're a little bit different, not as distinctly marked streaks on their sides. This is one, this sparrow is one that someone once described to me as a little red bird with a green head. And I thought, oh, that can't be. Well, here it is, another one of Reinhardt's photos. Anyone want to guess this one? All right, good job. You all got it. Awesome. That's the Henslow sparrow. Used to be in that same genus, but now it's in its own genus. Little stocky bird with a short stubby tail, pretty big head, pretty big bill. Overall, you could see how it's kind of reddish brown body and this camo like greenish head, some distinct lines in the face, lateral throat stripe, mustache stripe, postocular, a little bit of eye ring. Like the Lacans and the grasshopper, it's just in the grass. You're not going to find that really in brushy areas very much. I mean, they could be the odd one there, but mostly they're out in the grass. And they've just very weak flyers, fly a short distance and drop back down. So here's another one from a little bit different lighting. What they do is they'll usually pop up a couple times if you're walking around looking for them, and then my take on these grassy secretive sparrows is that they have evolved for thousands of years with bison or other large mammals in the grasslands. So if you're walking around looking for them, as long as you don't ever encircle them where they land, because then you're really going to stress them out and might even step on them. But if you have a few people walking along in a line or or something, you flush it a few times, and then you after a couple, 2 or 3 times of flushing it, you leave it alone. Every once in a while, what happens is they'll pop up once or twice, and they'll land in a little bush like this, and you get a nice look at them. And I think what the bird's thinking is, oh, here's some annoying large mammals that are walking through a field. I'm going to just move over here. Happens again, and then they go, oh, these things, I'm just going to go sit on this bush till they pass. So yeah, you don't need to get too close. Definitely, like I said, don't encircle it. Don't trample the crud out of the habitat. That happens a lot if it's a small bit of habitat. I've seen it more with things like LeConte sparrow. That will be in little wet patches. But I don't feel like you're stressing them out too much if you just walk through it and pop them up a couple of times and then leave them alone. The last one of these small short-tailed sparrows that you might find in the grass is Savannah sparrow. And this one has this pattern that I like to think of as light, dark, repeat. So light, median crown stripe, dark lateral crown, light eyebrow, dark postocular or eye line, light auricular, dark mustache, light malar or submustachial stripe, dark lateral throat stripe, and light throat. And this dark light is very distinctive on these guys. It stands out, and you can see that in any, the colors don't matter, it's just dark light. A lot of them, even more than half, will have a little bit of yellow in the supraloral or the front of their eyebrow, but that's not a great characteristic because enough of them don't have it. These are by far the most commonly encountered sparrow in the winter, I'd say, unless you're talking about in your yard. But if you're out in a big natural area in fields or even wetlands, these are pretty common throughout the peninsula. Also, fine streaking below, like little chocolate sprinkles on their chest.
Hey,
Savannah sparrow, yes. Yes, question.
Can you tell the behavioral thing about?
Yeah, so if you're walking through a field and you flush them, they'll flush from farther away than the previous 3 species I mentioned that all used to be Amidromus. And they'll fly farther. They fly a little bit higher in a more bounding, kind of a stronger flight than those other 3, grasshopper, LeContes, and Henslows. Those have a weak flight. They look like they kind of don't even know how to fly or something. I've seen those pop up and someone will say the bird's injured or it's sick or so it's a baby, it doesn't know how to fly or something, but they're just, they don't, when they get flushed, they just fly a little bit low and then they drop back down and then they run. And Savannah sparrows usually, almost always, fly a little bit higher, a little bit of a bounding flight and farther. They'll flush from when you're not as close to them. Those other 3 sparrows, you have to be right on top of them almost before you flush them. Savannah sparrows are often in flocks and you don't find those other guys in flocks. And Savannah sparrows you'll often find around wetlands and like right out over the wetland where you wouldn't find the other sparrows out over the wetland. This one is out over a marsh. Another thing in Savannah sparrows that can trick people up, which is another, the thing I mentioned from Sibley, is make sure you're using the right field mark and you're actually seeing it, is, and this can happen for a lot of birds, when you're looking at them in certain lights, because the underside of their tail is kind of silvery, they look like they have white outer tail feathers. They don't. I mean, unless you call this light reflection on the edge light, but it's not like in the Vesper sparrow that really does have white on the outer. If you spread the tail apart, you wouldn't, if you look from above, you wouldn't see white, but they can look like they do. So that can be on a lot of photos, at least, misleading, but that's, you know, look at the rest of it. It's a small bird with a short, little pointy tail. It's not a Vesper sparrow, especially if you compare it to this one, which is, all right, you guys might have guessed that was coming up. So Vesper sparrows, again, are a lot bigger sparrow, longer tail than a Savannah, and a lot bigger head. Their heads protrude a lot, even when they're relaxed like this one. So with any bird, their mood will affect their posture, and even a little tiny Savannah sparrow can pop its head out and look big-headed, or a big-headed Vesper sparrow could scrunch down even more and look smaller-headed. But for a while, you'll see Vesper sparrows are a lot bigger-headed than Savannah sparrows. So that's one good thing to look for. In the winter, so you're walking around on a really short grass field, maybe even a lot of open dirt there, or something like a airporty field, or you know, agricultural field that's pretty open, and a flock of sparrows flies up, and you're still pretty far away when they fly up, and they all go real far and they land up in a tree. A good chance those are Vesper sparrows. The white outer tail feathers in the Vesper sparrow, you can, if you see those obviously, then you've got it. It's a good chance it's a Vesper sparrow and not something else. But depending on the light, that can be really hard to see. Now they have a little bit of that dark light pattern in the savanna, but not nearly as pronounced. Like their median crown stripe also has dark spots in it, so it's not really light. And then their eyeline and their mustache stripe are not that well set off from their auricular. So it's almost like one big dark patch here, as opposed to on the savanna, dark, light, dark. Also often, and this is not all the time, but often you'll see the malar area, and then the area behind their auriculars are real pale. And sometimes that makes a V. And I used to say, this is the V for Vesper, but then on too many birds, we couldn't see it. So I thought, oh, okay, if you don't see it very often, it's not that great of a field mark, but you can see it, and it will stand out on some birds, the V for Vesper. They're streaked below, and that streaking is variable. Here's one. Sometimes it kind of, another Vesper, the streaking gets a little mushed together, so it almost looks like a smudge across the chest. It looks like they've got white under the tails. That's because you're just seeing the outer tail feathers as the tail's folded together. This one, again, the head pattern's not that well defined. The V for Vesper gets scrunched up here because the way the bird's hunched down. The white eye ring is pretty noticeable, but the pale or eyebrow, you know, none of that stuff stands out on the face. Next sparrow, here's a fairly common one. Also, this one is, I might have to play the song for you guys because this is a good clue. Anyone want to guess what that is? Correct, song sparrow. And here is the sound, the jimp call. That is the most distinctive of the sparrow calls. Notice I haven't gone into the sounds of the other sparrows so much because they all give these chips or seat notes that are a little bit tricky. So song sparrow is the first of our Melospiza sparrows, and that's a good, that's the genus. And translated from Latin, that means song and sparrow, or little finch. So it's a good genus name for these guys. And the Melospiza sparrows, I like to think of as the medium sparrows. Medium size overall, medium long tail, medium size bill. They're also fairly common. They're not real common, but they're not super rare. But the song sparrows at least. And they're out in open areas and in brushy patches. So the way these, I'd say 90-something% of the song sparrows I see in the winter are because I hear jimp, jimp, that call note I just played. You hear that note, you should just play that over and over and over till you get used to it. And they sometimes if you pish, they'll respond with a little jimp call. But then they do respond to pishing, but like so many sparrows, they might pop up for just a second and then pop back down in the bush. Another trick besides going pishing is just like kissing your fingers, make a little squeaky noise, or just kissing your fingers that way, making some kind of a chip note. Sometimes just making some other weird sounds will get the birds to respond. So the song sparrow has the same dark light pattern as a savanna sparrow. You can't see so well in this picture, but it's got a light median crown stripe, darker lateral, dark light, et cetera, light throat that you can't see so well here. One difference from the savanna, overall shape of the bird, they're bigger and much longer tailed proportionately. Their streaks down on their underparts are a little bit thicker, a little bit more like melted chocolate sprinkles than just the regular chocolate sprinkles. And then their eyebrow, if you're only looking at their head and you don't have any other clues, they've got a broader all gray eyebrow that stands out more than the savanna sparrow. Can I go back to savanna sparrow? It's a lot smaller. There's some little darker flecks in there. It's not this big, broad gray eyebrow. So moving on to the next species here. This is a rare one that you might find in the same habitat as song sparrow, but much, much less common, although widely distributed throughout the state and even in the Central America and the Caribbean. That's right, it's the Lincoln sparrow. And fine streaks below, but over a little bit of a buffy wash. It's a slight buffy, pale, you know, kind of a almost orangey wash over the chest and flanks. They're compared with a song sparrow, they're a little daintier, a little thinner and smaller tailed. And if you watch enough sparrows, if you see one of these things flush out of a bush, and you've seen some song sparrows recently, so you get that shape in your mind, or also swamp sparrows, which are the same shape pretty much as a song sparrow. You'll notice these are a little bit more dainty. They're pretty quiet in the winter. Sometimes they'll do a little chip note that's slightly different than some other sparrows. But the features, and in addition to the structure being daintier, the fine streaking, fine lines on their face, and nice little white eye ring. So cute little dainty sparrow with fine streaking over a buffy wash. Rare in the winter in Florida, Lincoln sparrow. All right, here's one of my favorites. This is one of my favorite sparrow photos too. Another Reinhardt picture, of course. This is one of the more commonly encountered ones though, although if you're not out looking for sparrows, and you could easily overlook these guys. That's right, this is a swamp sparrow on a little cattail leaf, I think. So these are really common in wetlands in Florida, but like I mentioned, you can overlook them because they're down on the ground or out of sight most of the time. And so this is one where you go to the edge of a wetland, you're looking out over a bunch of cattails or some fairly medium tall wetland vegetation anytime after, you know, mid-October in Florida, and you think, oh, I don't see any birds, you know, maybe there's some gallinules or something, but I don't see any birds around here. So you start pitching like crazy, and all of a sudden you hear these chip notes coming from the wetland, and that's the swamp sparrows. They have a loud chip. It's a little bit like Eastern Phoebe's call note. It's the loud, sharp chip note. And sometimes they do a little growl note when they chase each other, which you might hear, but they'll pop up usually just quickly. Sometimes if you're lucky, they'll sit up for a while and then they go back down, and good luck getting them to pop up again. So you got to be prepared for them. So same size and shape as a song sparrow, and you could also see song sparrows in marshes. People think of song sparrows as these terrestrial brush pile sparrows, and that's where they mostly are, but every once in a while, song sparrows will mix in a wetland with a swamp sparrow. Swamp sparrows are very rufusy. They're not really streaked below. Big rufous panel on their greater wing coverts and on the main flight feathers of the wing. Also a lot of rufous in the tail. The rufous or buffy flanks are distinctive in the sparrows, and not really streaked. Sometimes, like I mentioned earlier, a little bit of a fine or like a diffuse streaking, but not that much. And a bunch of gray, overall grayish look to the head. Variable amount of dark markings on the head that are so variable they're not that useful. But just think a lot of gray on the head and nape, a lot of rufous in the wing and tail, and then buffy flanks unstreaked below. And almost always in a swamp, but every once in a while you'll find them in uplands. Here's another look at one. You can't see the tail. It's in an upland. It's kind of a weird look, but a lot of rufous, that's obvious. And then not streaked below, or this is even less streaking than a super fine streak LeConte. And it's got just buffy on the flanks, not buffy across the chest like the LeConte. A lot more rufous. All right, so that's it. Those are all the sparrows you're likely to encounter in Florida in the winter, or even some that you're not that likely to encounter. Happy to take any questions you might have. Again, I can't say too many good things about Sibley's Birding Basics book and those handouts that Deborah found online and sent around. And if you go to that website, there are a lot more handouts there with sparrows. So I recommend being prepared. Make little quiz cards any way you can. Nowadays you can scan just about anything and quiz yourself on it. So when you see them, you're prepared. And yeah, go out there and enjoy those sparrows. So thank you very much, and yeah, happy to take questions.
That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Adam. Question?
I've got a question. Are there any little sparrows that have yellow underneath the tail up to the legs.
That's so one thing that I took out of this presentation, because it was going to be too long, and it might have already been too long, was birds that aren't sparrows that you might confuse with sparrows. And that was one of the ones I had in there, which is oh, I thought someone was just about to type it in. Anyone want to guess what that is? Yellow underneath the tail in the vent. I'm going to see if someone pops
Is
this
it yellow rump warbler?
up. Close, but it's not underneath the tail. Was it moving its tail up and down also a little bit?
Not that I
Did you notice
remember.
that? No, okay, it probably was, yes. Kathy Wriggling got it, palm warbler. The key to telling all these other things, so another one, that bird that's, its nickname is the bird most frequently mistaken for a sparrow. That's the female red-winged blackbird. But there are lots of other birds that look like sparrows, like a non-breeding plumaged bobolink, or pine siskin, or lots of other warblers. It's the, look at the bill of the bird, and it should be conical, thicker than a warbler's bill, not as long as a blackbird or blackbird family bill. There's variation, but they all are within that sort of little conical bill shape. So like a little pointy cone.
Okay, well, I have seen a palm warbler flicking before out in woods, but this was around a lake. It was up in
Yes.
Tavares at Trout Lake just last weekend, and
Yeah.
we watched him. It was in the grass, so yeah, we didn't know.
Yeah. That's they're all palm warblers in all kinds of different habitat, and they do often get confused for warblers, and they don't always for sparrows, not for warblers. Palm warblers often get mistaken for sparrows, because this is a classic example of that Sibley thing of know what field marks are actually good field marks, and then know if you're seeing those. So if it's flipping its tail up and down, that is a good field mark. And so people key into that, but just because they aren't flipping their tail doesn't mean it's not a palm warbler. And that's something that happens. You see a palm warbler and it's not bobbing its tail. And because they seem like they're doing that 95% of the time, if you don't see it doing it, you think, oh, it's not a palm warbler because it's not flipping its tail. But sometimes they don't do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Someone just said, do sparrows not sing in Florida? Yeah. So, and someone else asked for the website for the handout. Maybe if someone can post that on whatever Facebook thing or something like that, that would, yeah, or in the chat, maybe if someone can post that website in the chat.
Bird chat email, if you go back.
So Kit says, identify sparrows by song. Don't they sing in Florida? Not too much. Yes, and that is a great way to identify sparrows. And that's why I was saying at the beginning, if you ever have a chance to go looking for sparrows up north, definitely take advantage of that, because not only are they singing, but they're also sitting up. Oh yeah, Greta posted the cheat sheet. Good, thank you, Greta. So they'll sit up out in the open and sing. In Florida, just the Bachmans is consistently singing a lot. Now in the spring, before birds are about to migrate north, a lot of birds will start to sing a little bit. You'll especially hear that with white-throated and white-crowned sparrows out in fields, those two. The problem with birds when they're just starting to sing after a long winter off, they kind of don't have it, they haven't learned to, they're not in tune yet because they haven't been singing all winter, so they're kind of warming up. So you'll hear some really weird songs. So if you're used to hearing a white-throated sparrow singing on the breeding grounds and you're in Florida and you hear some really weird song and you think, what in the world is that? Well, it could be a white-throated sparrow just doing part of its song, just doing a couple notes or something like that. Yeah, so if you want to, I do recommend though, as you start getting closer to spring, go to areas where you've seen sparrows and see if you can try to pick up little bits of their songs. Chipping sparrows start singing. Those are hopefully in your yards if you've got feeders out, nice big yards. Yeah, just about any sparrow might sing a little bit in the spring, but it often is not their regular song. That was a great point. A Florida grasshopper sparrow. Yeah, okay, so this is a picture of a grasshopper sparrow right here. Those do breed in Florida, but they're super, super rare. Kissimmee Prairie Preserve is one place where you 3 lakes, wildlife management area, another place where you might find them, but they're so rare. It's you kind of got to get lucky. So that's yeah, you definitely have to be careful. You don't want to go walking around out in those fields there because they're super rare. And if you stepped on a nest or something like that, that would be a major disaster. One of the rarest birds in North America. So if you ever do go looking for Florida grasshopper sparrows, definitely stay on the roads and trails. Yeah. Any other questions? I know I'm way over here, Deborah. Sorry about that.
Everybody's really enjoyed it, and it'll be on YouTube so we can review. I hope you don't mind.
Don't mind, yeah. Okay, well, thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for coming. We'll see you next week. It's turkeys, wild turkeys. So
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hey, Rafa. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
everybody.
Yeah.
All right, let's figuring out how to log out of this thing here. Somehow.
That was excellent. So can we sign up for part 2?
he has other talks, I believe. Don't you, Adam?